invite now Aaron Lee and Dexter from Swarm, who have prepared. And I'm actually very curious about your conversation because we've been prepping a bit with some interesting topics. So you're going to speak about the creative tension, which is a very positive put, between the CTO and the CEO and how to collaborate in the early stage. Here are two things that you need to know about Dexter. He designs his own t-shirts, but they didn't arrive with his luggage for the conference, or he's still waiting. He cares about making products that solve important problems for people. Dexter is the CEO and the co-founder of Swarm, a community connecting founders with freelance tech builders who want to solve problems and build impactful projects together. His first company, by the way, from the Philippines, managed to get to the Y Combinator. Maybe you can also get some tips on how to get there. And he's super passionate mentor for startup founders. Aaron is the co-founder and the chief CTO of Swarm. He enjoys solving complex problems at scale, but maintains pragmatic approach into programming. He spends most of his time on the ground writing code, mentoring others to write better code. And he shared that his job is to make Dexter happy. So let's see, what do you have to share? The stage is yours.
Thank you, Rina.
Thank you.
I think it's everyone's job, right? To make your boss happy. Right? It's never written anywhere. Oops, was that me? Sorry. Anyway, it's not written anywhere, but you know, it's kind of unspoken rule, right? The more happy my boss is, the happier I get as well. Yes. So anyway, I'm Aaron, and I'm CTO for Swarm, and this is Dexter with me.
Hello.
So today we're gonna talk about like how we build product. How we build product on startups, right? And like there's always this tension between, you know, the business side of things and what the CEO wants to happen, right? And like what the CTO just, you know, locked up in his room, programming all day, and Dexter's gonna be like, so when's it gonna be done, right?
My favorite question.
So yeah, before we start, we're just gonna ask a couple of questions, and we're just gonna ask people to raise their hands, you know, if you're part of those. So, who here are students? Okay, so one person. Wow. Okay. Two. 10 years in the industry? Okay, 10 years or over? Okay. Okay. And the rest are also professionals, I guess? Yes? Okay. How about engineers, like programmers, you know,
Okay, that's significant.
designers? Okay, it's two.
One's an engineer and a designer. That's a
Oh, interesting. We should get that guy's number, right? How about management? Okay. Okay. Who here wants to work at a startup? Okay. This includes like people who are currently working in a startup. I'm assuming that you know you like working in a startup because you're working in a startup, right? So again, can you guys raise your hands again? Okay, quite a lot. How about those who want to found a startup, to create their own startup? Oh wow. Okay. Great. So you have a question, Dexter, right?
So, test. Okay, great. So a couple of things. Today, we're actually going to talk about building startup organizations. And tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about building startup ecosystems. So Aaron and I are actually based in Southeast Asia, which interesting parallel to Southeast Europe. We started as a services sector, and the ecosystem for innovation is getting off the ground just right now. So Aaron and I co-founded actually the first company that got into Y Combinator in Southeast Asia. So it's kind of the first venture-funded startup. So the reason why I'm super excited to be here is because I think the evolution of Asia, Southeast Asia and Southeast Europe is very similar. So I think my bias as a founder is to build problem-oriented products that solve problems for real people. I'm not necessarily a delight-oriented or entertainment-oriented founder. So it's very different. I like solving problems. So from that view, for those of you, we could just do this popcorn. I want you to think of one word that describes what you think would make an early stage startup successful. Just one word. I'll let you think about it for a moment. My word is learning, okay? So my view is that if you can build an organization that can learn, you can build an organization that can do anything, okay? So from you all, popcorn, I think I saw some nods here. What's one word that you think makes an organization successful? Change, okay. Over here. Team, oh, okay. I think you like him. Smile. Capability. Adaptability, and then cash. Okay, I heard cash, that's practical. Are you an investor, by the way? Because, how about in the back over there? The designer engineer, what word do you think describes what will make a startup successful? Okay, got shy all of us. Support? Explore. Okay, interesting. Okay, like risk, learning from failure. Okay, very interesting. Innovation. Okay. So one of the things that I was talking to Irina is that when you work for a startup, everyone's not qualified for their job because you will do things that you've never done before.
Is this how you're telling me you're firing me?
No. No, this means that we're both gonna be looking in case this doesn't pan out. I think that when I started Caliber as the first startup, it's 2012, we were focused very much on connecting people and jobs. And the economy was growing very fast in Southeast Asia. And we had to solve problems and adapt to solutions that we just didn't know how to do back then. We used AI to match people with jobs in 2012, before any of the off-the-shelf or open source projects were launched, right? So you will have to do things, and that's the way it was before, but it is the constant factor of being a startup. You have to adapt, solve problems, and do things that you've never done before. So a little bit about what Swarm is. Swarm is a guild for fractional tech professionals. One of the things that we've very much observed is that people want to work independently, take on consulting projects, but they don't want to do it alone. And that's who we're focused on, enabling people to work independently by focusing on building teams of people that they can work with. So Aaron and I are going to talk a little bit about the process of building our product, our philosophy of building not just a product, but a company. And I think that jumping off that point, an organization that can learn anything, can do anything. In the early stages, I have two jobs: to learn fast and to get evidence. And I have to do it before we run out of cash, okay? So under both of those circumstances, to get evidence and to learn, speed is what I am always geared towards speed. That's why my favorite question is when, right? It's not, we've already sorted out the why, we've already sorted out the what. When drives what Aaron and my collaboration is. The speed at which we can execute, speed at which we can learn, speed at which we can gather evidence. Because that will serve as a foundation for us to raise money, serve as a foundation for us to be able to communicate to others what value we're able to accomplish for society, okay? So let me kick it off to Aaron.
Thank you, Dexter. So I'm happy to know that I still have a job tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, Dexter's all about learning, right? And I think a lot of the people that we worked with in both companies have always been focused on hiring people who like learning, right? Who are into learning, who have this fire, right, inside of themselves, who want to stay there and learn with you and grow with you and get challenged, right? And I think everyone here, has that in their hearts, somehow. And my word actually for Dexter's question earlier is people. I think people are what's important in making startups successful. And we just optimize for speed. If Dexter is all about like when, I'm about the how, right? That's my job. My job is ideally to prepare as much as I can. I'm kind of like the Boy Scout, right? If we're going on a camping trip if we forget like the pan, we can't cook, right? Dexter's gonna be like, okay, let's go. Let's just take that rock and let's just put our dinner on it, right? But my job is to make sure that ideally we have all those tools so that when we need to go fast, we can, right? And if Dexter says, okay, we need to cross that river, I'm gonna be like, okay, but we need 3 days to build a boat so that we can cross the river, or else blah, 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 blah will happen, right? It's mostly my job, right? So I'm gonna talk a bit about the tech because it's technically my job. So this, I guess, mostly for the engineers, but I guess for the management people, this is a glimpse into like how we think as engineers, right? So one of the things that we tackled, right, when we started Swarm was like, okay, so what tech stack do we use? I think for engineers, it's like the most common question that we ask ourselves. What tool do we use? We're so fascinated by technology, you see, and it's all we talk about, to be honest with you. If you lock us up in a room, and we don't need to know each other's names, but we just need to know that, okay, you use React, bro. I use React too. But why are you using Angular, right? So, yeah, so for us engineers, tech is very important, and it's a very central question, and rightfully so, right? Because it sets up everything that you're going to build on top of. It's the foundation of everything, right? In your product. So, as much as you're preparing, like I'm going to talk through like how I kind of interpret his words, right? So he said, speed, learn and provide evidence before we run out of money, right? So what does that mean? How should a developer or engineer interpret those set of words, right? When your CEO comes to you and tells you that. For me, it means that the product should work, obviously. He didn't even talk about that because it's just a given, right? But you have to keep that in mind. The product needs to work. It should be easy to add features. It should be easy to find and fix bugs because bugs are inevitable, unfortunately. And obviously, you have to stay within budget, right? So those are just 4 simple things, but like, how should I choose tech based on those 4 things? You should choose tech that helps you build faster because it's already out there. People have used it. People have proved that it works, that it scales, right? And more importantly, you should choose tech that you can hire for, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that if you go and look at everyone and everyone's using React, right? Oh, I should use React because I can hire a React developer anytime I want, right? It's not necessarily the case. You can choose a tech or some tech stack, whatever. If it's, you can train that person anyway. If it's easy to train them in that anyway, that's still okay, right? But you should, ideally, if you work in a startup, you shouldn't necessarily choose this super exotic tech that supposedly solves all the problems, right? You shouldn't necessarily have to choose those, even though it's super sexy to do that. And you can flex on your other tech bros, right? The last thing for me is, and this is mostly a bonus, is if the cost of using such technology, like not just from a people perspective, but from an infrastructure perspective, like in Google Cloud and AWS, right? If the cost can scale, right? So serverless technologies have been out there for 8 years, 5 years, whatever, and they have upsides and downsides, but cost is a very, very big upside for me. I mean, for me, one of the things that are super important when I mentioned people is, would I rather pay $1,000 for a server, or would I rather pay $1,000 to hire an engineer, right? Who can help me with whatever else? Most of the time, I'd rather hire a person, right? Unless the machine just does it better, This is how it is. So, what did we actually end up using, right? I mean, let's bring it back down to, to the ground, right? So we used React, okay? And it's because I wasn't really a front-end developer, and I wanted to use something that was pretty mature. And we also used this framework, which just got deprecated, unfortunately, this last March, so we're going to have to move out of it. React Static, okay? So it's not an advertisement for it, but it's pretty good, actually. I really liked it. But it's because I was anticipating that for the product that we're going to build, we needed to generate, or we needed to make certain pages public. So we're building a marketplace, right? For builders. So I anticipated that the product that we're building needed to be public, like for profiles, for example, you want to be like LinkedIn, right? You go to LinkedIn, you can just search somebody's name, right? So I assume that we need to do that, and React Static supposedly helps us, for that. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and Swarm right now is purely by invite, so we didn't have a need for that at all, and now it's deprecated, right? So it's okay to make mistakes with your tech, but ideally you also think about that, right? Maybe I'm taking a risk with this piece of technology, so ideally I can refactor my way out of it eventually in the future, right? So we're also using like Firebase, Algolia, all these technologies that are super cheap to get into and scales as your users grow. Okay, well, I'm not gonna, belabor yourself. I mean, us with all those details, right? And I think that's it. That's for the tech.
And I think one of the areas, again, moving fast and learning fast is the name of the game, early stage. So for context, we raised a pre-seed angel round, and our aim is like within this year to raise our seed round. So our time frame to learn and to get evidence, it's in a matter of 6 months, right? So one of the things, an example of how to plan both the sprints, the learning objectives, is that if it takes longer than a month to produce a set of features, to prove a hypothesis, we won't do it if it's longer than a month, okay? So selecting what you're trying to learn is very important. And the conversation that Aaron and I have is, well, how can we learn this thing within 1 month, okay? Because we need to get evidence, learn, and iterate based on that. So, but I acknowledge that a lot of the infrastructure decisions that Aaron will need to make is longer in time frame. But the learning objectives have to be testable within a month, like a hypothesis and some evidence within a month. Let me give you an example. Our hypothesis is that that we're working on, like literally we're launching on July 4, is that you will have high engagement if you're able to get a client, like a founder, and a freelancer to talk and chat, right? So we have benchmarks in terms of disengagement. So our hypothesis is that the engagement will improve by 30% once we launch this chat feature. Okay, Aaron says, okay, I asked, how long will it take to build? Well, if we do like fully automated chat, 2 months. I'm like, no, we can't do that in 2 months. So Aaron came up with a very interesting scheme. Whenever a new conversation's initiated, he built an admin tool and allowed the chat to be created by Swarm staff, which allowed us to push it out, develop the feature within 3 weeks. So from 2 months to 3 weeks, we were able to push the product because Aaron had defined the technical strategy to execute. I defined the learning objective. Aaron's defined the execution strategy. And then now it just becomes someone's job to be able to now manually create that chat. So this is a large part of our exercise because by the time we had left our previous company, we're already big. We had like 1,000 customers. These are how we interpret, you might have heard the phrase, do things that don't scale, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to do unscalable things. It means that in order to learn, sometimes to do it scalably, it takes 2 months. But that's too long. So do things that don't scale so you can learn faster. So we launched that on July 4. We're going to try to see if we hit that benchmark of improving the engagement rate by 30%. So it's a very practical example how a technical decision and a learning business objective can be aligned, right? Aaron, my favorite word in the company is when. Aaron's favorite word is no. No, I mean, it's very classic. No is the start of all foundation of knowledge and wisdom. So.
He's the optimist and I'm the pessimist, right?
Yeah. He's like, oh, you should call the airport because your bags aren't going to arrive. I'm like, no, the airlines will take care of it. And it turns out that today Aaron was right. My bags did not arrive. So
I'll get you some air tags, bro.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
What's interesting is we tried building this chat thing, right? Because we want to improve engagement. Actually, before that, the first thing we built was a forum where people can talk. And Dexter told me, okay, now we need to post projects, right? Because we need the clients to come in and people to say, oh, I want to work on this project, right? So, okay, so essentially we're going to build the whole marketplace immediately in 1 month, which is obviously impossible, right? With like the number of people that we had. So what we did was build the forum first, and then we just essentially copy pasted the forum over, and we made that into like, you know, a way for people to post projects. But the rest of the process, meaning like when somebody says, oh, hey, I want to work on this project, right? The rest of those processes are mostly like manual. So we had like team, staff, to come in and talk to the client, talk to the builders. Hey, so you want to work together, you know, let's vet each other, like how do you want to work, blah, blah, blah. And all of those things were done manually for quite some time before we eventually automate them out, right? So this chat thing is in response to all the learnings that we had that, okay, this is the process, you know. Clients will want to know these pieces of information first before a builder comes in, right? So all of those things we couldn't have done if we had just immediately just built everything, right? So manual work is not necessarily your enemy, so long as you keep learning at the forefront of your goals.
That's right. You know, like investors oftentimes will say, oh, this won't scale, right? So I'm not saying that this is your investment talking point. But again, from the point of view, if your objective is to learn, we have this phrase, it's called auto manual. You want to do things with your hands first so you know how it will take shape. So when it comes to designing the interfaces and the workflows, you know exactly what to do, right? If we built everything automatedly at first, we probably would have spent 1 to 2 months to build the wrong thing. So by building something that's manually operated first, we were able to launch faster, learn faster, and learn how to build better workflows and interfaces, right? So that's, you know, I don't know if that's how the Valley does it, but I think this is when we said it's creative tension, Aaron's like, no, I think you're being nice. It's not impossible. It's crazy to build a marketplace in 1 month, right? You are crazy, Dexter. But because we used the forum format and we launched it and operated it manually, we actually created a different kind of marketplace. A marketplace that was focused on conversations rather than focused on the posting, right? And I think that would not have happened unless we did this manually first. We focused very much on doing it hands-on with our hands first so we can launch faster, learn faster. The last thing is that this is probably what we interpret to be an MVP, right? So MVP for us, we're not building like deep tech. So MVP for us means getting something into the hands of the users so we can ask the users questions. Like, what is your motivation here? What's your friction point? What goal are you trying to solve? And where do you feel the friction against that goal? It's very difficult to do that in an interview when you don't have something in their hands. It's very difficult to do this when when they don't actually have the problem, right? So the problem for our clients is that it's really hard to evaluate a freelancer, really hard, okay? So if you're asking them questions hypothetically about their past experiences, yes, you can learn something, but it won't tell you what the interface needs to look like. It's not until you actually put the product in their hands, have them post a real project, that you can actually understand where the friction is, what information and data do they need to see, such that they can make a decision, okay? So I did not realize, because like, how large was the engineering team at Caliber when we left? It's about 50, right?
50, including the testers,
yeah. So it was a big operation already. We had QA, we had a DevOps team, we had a front end and a platform team.
Data science team as well.
So most of the conversation between product and strategy and engineering was at the very, very like 6-month roadmap level. In an early stage startup, Aaron and I are talking twice a week, and we're always talking about how can we launch this now and what can we learn from it, right? So the conversation, the learning loop has to happen very fast. Okay.
Well, what's always been constant for us, and is like the last point that we want to end on, is that it's the people that make all of this happen, right? So the two of us talk like this, like pretending that it's the two of us doing everything, right? But it's obviously not the case. We have a very talented team behind us. And to be honest with you, most of our people that we hire aren't like the usual people that, you know, who would apply for your company. Like an example would be like our lead data scientist / data engineer / everything else. He took up architecture, right? So he was designing buildings and stuff. He was
Like interior design, not like
Yeah.
software architecture, like
not software architecture.
what
it's
chairs
literally-
match the curtains.
But he's like one of the best engineers that I work with. We hired him in Swarm as a data scientist, but he wasn't even doing data. He was an engineer. He was like making interfaces and, you know, backend, whatever. But he was very interested in it, right? He wanted to learn. And he had our support, and we believed in him, right? Other people we hire are still interns, and I pair program with them, right? Because we work fully remotely. These are like islands away from us. People we hire sometimes, even in the Philippines, are islands away from us. We literally cannot meet, right? But how do you build that culture? For an engineering team, for me, what helps, especially if they're very fresh, right? Fresh from college or whatever, is to pair program with them, right? Sometimes you're the guy who's doing the actual programming, they're watching, they're asking questions. Sometimes it's them. And you're telling them, okay, you can do this, you can do that. Why would you do this instead of that, right? You're trying to be with them, well, digitally, and trying to program with them, solving problems with them, right? What does that lead into? As a startup, it takes a lot of time, I'll be honest with you, right? Sometimes it's faster if I just do it myself, let's be honest. But why are we doing things this way? It's because a few months down the road, a year down the road, we're gonna have to hire more people. And am I gonna hire a manager outside? Maybe we'll have to, right? But ideally, the people we have, the engineers that we have, the designers that we have in the team, can just hire their own junior designers, right?
I didn't know we thought so much in common, Aaron. It took us speaking in Romania.
It's because I always say no.
Yeah, that's right. It's dead on. Okay.
Yeah, so, but in order for that to happen, so I talk about this like it's some silver bullet that will solve all your problems, right? It's not, right? Your company culture, the way you operate, the way your founders work together, it has to make sense, right? The company culture needs to be all about that learning and looking for people who have that fire in them, right? Who you can trust, who you like working with, of course, and who are basically independent. Most of the people we hire, like they're more active they're still students. They're more active doing like organizational work rather than their studies, right? Dexter and I are famously also didn't have the highest scores while we were in university.
Honestly, I don't know what my final grades were in college.
Did you
'cause
even get your diploma?
I didn't even pick up my diploma. It's I think my parents want it, but I think it was what I learned outside of the classroom is actually what I put a premium on. So I said earlier that speed is our primary driver, but to Aaron's point, hiring and selecting the right people and spending the time to be able to build those relationships is where I advocate for going slow. It is slower to program when you're doing it, when your CTO is peer programming with, a 19-year-old intern, right? And the reason, and I just want to underscore, this is a critical point. We've built a company, I built a company that's scaled to, 120 people across 2 markets. The folks who you have around the table, your first 10, are critical at scaling from your first 10 to your first 100. They're the ones who are going to be your battlefield promoted managers. They're the ones who are going to bridge your mindset, vision, and culture from the intimate situations you have at the start, your founder culture, to your growth culture, okay? So spending the time to be able to solve problems and identify folks that you can solve problems with and work with and build that kind of relationship, spending that time in the early days such that they can feel it firsthand, working with a co-founder will enable them to pull in the next 5 people after them, right? That's the only way in which you'll scale it. The way in which I met Aaron is actually, we did hire one of those experienced managers for industry, but it didn't work out. in that previous company. And he came from Samsung, very senior person. It didn't work out because he didn't have the problem-solving mindset for a startup. He was trying to bring corporate templates into a startup that had developed its own way of thinking, solving problems, and operating. So there are certain aspects that it does make sense to take time and invest in people building practices internally. So let me show how extreme we are. We don't care if you went to college. We don't care what you studied. We literally, I was telling Irina earlier, in our previous company, we hired somebody who went to an agriculture school who learned how to code pen and paper. And she was our best performing engineer in 2018, right? How did we know? It's because, how did we know she could do this? It's because we had created engineering assessments that test how quickly somebody can learn something new and use that, right? Aaron's engineering test is you actually have to create a case study. You have to develop something, an interface, and we look at your code. And we didn't care if you went to college, where you went to college. So we hired a bunch of people who dropped out. One of our best performing engineers now goes to an online school. She's in the middle of the province, literally there are chickens in the background crowing when we have our staff meetings, right? So when you become flexible with your traditional criteria of what quality means, you can look for talent anywhere, okay? Because I will tell you right now, we have some of the best performing engineers in our market, Aaron being one of them. But it takes time to be able to identify them and also work and train them such that they can actually adopt the technologies and grow very fast.
So that's about it. Are we doing questions? Or?
Okay.
Okay.
You, but maybe you can also help me out. So I'm going to warm up a bit for you, and then you can ask your questions to Aaron and Dexter. My first one is like this. So we often, when we pick, people for our team and even co-founders, we have this confirmation bias where we look for people who are very similar to us. Now I'm looking at you guys, and you're actually diametral in one aspect or two. You do alike, you're alike in some others. So how do you get over this confirmation bias, and then how do you learn in a startup where you should be doing exactly the opposite, hire people who are different than you, embrace this kind of diversity, and that the person is different from you, and this could be actually beneficial? How do you do that?
Okay, so I will speak very fast because this is central to culture. Okay, in my view, building culture is a 4-step process. First is acceptance. So once we're a part of the team, Aaron knows that I'm not going to kick him out. That's why you can joke about it, right? Because you've earned your seat at the table. Second, if you've accepted, then you can build authenticity. We can be honest with each other and challenge each other based on our own points of view. So acceptance, authenticity, then accountability. Accountability is very important, such that if we can be honest with each other and we already accept each other, then I can push, right? So these foundations, acceptance, authenticity, accountability, allows you to work with people that are radically different from you, right? It creates that common set of trust that that, if Aaron has different points of view, the way in which we came up with our company name was a result of a very heated debate where Aaron said, why are we, our previous idea, why are we doing that? I would not want to join a company that's trying to do essentially like an Upwork. That sucks. And that literally, when he says that sucks, provoked conversation on, well, what if we're not excited about our own idea? If we wouldn't join as our own users, well, how do we expect to mobilize, inspire, and attract others, right? So the fact that he felt safe enough to say this sucks allowed us. He was allowed to do that. He could do that because we had a sense of acceptance, a sense of authenticity, honesty, and accountability, right? And the last one I'll say is playfulness. If we don't, I'm a dad and I make a lot of dad jokes, and apparently Swarm is very rife with bee puns if you join us. But a sense of playfulness, it's very intense to do very deep problem solving especially when the stakes are high. Don't underestimate like an ounce of playfulness that either gives you more energy to keep going, or it allows you to relax a moment so you can take a step back and look at the big picture. Playfulness is actually a very actionable, valuable thing.
I think there's another question.
There you go. Thank you.
You mentioned the chat, the manual chat.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the hypothesis that you had that users will want to interact or will interact 30% more if you build these things. So how did you collaborate to get to that hypothesis to begin with?
Okay. You want me to start? So we're very data driven. We benchmarked what percentage of projects did not progress to close, right? So like we had essentially, very specifically, we collaborated on the scorecard, the metrics, and we noticed that the biggest gap is at the last step. If we provide applications to a founder, there's still a 50% drop off, right? So we wanted to improve that, by 30%. So it started by looking at the data. Our data scientist, the very attractive interior designer person, had identified that as the gap because it's his job to opportunistically look for places and where we can improve. Then we created a strategy together, both the design team and the operations team, on what to target. So the data science person identified where the biggest drop-off was, and then the ops and the design team had identified the strategy to close it. And then I just said, well, let's do it next week. It's my job.
And obviously I said no.
Yeah, that's true.
Until he said, okay, but we're going to die if we don't do it. Okay, let's do it. But, just to add on that, right? Why chat specifically? Because we were doing all of this in email. It was working, right? We were closing projects, but it was too slow. Like most of the feedback we got from clients and builders were like, I like that guy, but it was just too slow. Like he replied 3 days later. I'm like, I'm already doing something else, right? I found another builder, right? So what we said was, okay, people like talking with each other, right? It's just a bit ad hoc. It's not too formal. So we thought, let's just build chat. It's like Airbnb, to be honest with you. Like if you book a room in Airbnb, you'll get access, direct messaging to the host, right? So it's just like that. You can ask them questions like, is there free food? Like, is there a spa or whatever, blah, 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 right? So yeah.
That's for Airbnb, but we don't.
Yeah, but obviously we don't have that. But yeah. Anyway.
So guys, okay, one last question and then...
So you mentioned about the trade-off between scalability and the time needed to deliver a feature. How do you make the decision about that trade-off?
So the hard parameter is I won't allow like a feature that takes longer than a month to build. So if it takes longer, then we automatically look for strategies to launch it faster so we can learn quicker. So that's from just a timing point of view, and then maybe scalability. And I can
So when you have a problem, typically we assemble the whole company, to be honest with you. Like you mentioned, like the sales and ops people, right? So we're going to talk about, okay, so what should we do to solve this problem, right? So with the chat thing, we're talking emails. Okay, so what can we build? It's chat, right? So that was a whole company thing, right? But when we decided to finally build it, we know all of us already know like what chat is, right? Sorry. So in order to meet the hard deadlines that we have, we'll just chip away. Okay, let's remove group chat. Okay, let's remove having this CTA here, right? Let's remove being able to mute, block people, whatever, kick people from the chat, whatever, things like that, until we get to a point that, okay, this is like all the bare minimum features that we need to build, and we'll basically be able to prove the thing that we need to prove, right?
last thing, like if you notice something in what Aaron said, it was about sculpting away features. Now, this is where I want to call out where Aaron, I think, is unique as a CTO. When he asks designers to propose, he wants to see the full design in all of its glory. So Aaron knows what he's building towards, right? So related to scalability, Aaron wants to know the trajectory, right? Not just what the requirement is. And that's actually quite unique, having worked with different engineering leaders before. Typically, engineers and like product managers will start with the minimum first, then you add later. Aaron's unique in the sense he wants to see the full, and then he'll sculpt away, right? So that way, and I think actually that's what one of the reasons now that I'm on stage, that's allowed us to move fast, because we can negotiate what's critical and what's not based on based on that full vision. So that it's kind of a unique way of building product in my experience.